The story begins with two friends, Tim and Lee, being dragged toward one of the most feared prisons in South Africa. Their hands are locked in cuffs. Their faces are calm, but the guards around them treat them like dangerous criminals. According to the law, these two men have committed a serious crime. They are now being sent to serve 12 long years inside Pretoria Prison, a facility so secure that not a single prisoner has ever managed to escape from it. At the main entrance, the warden is already waiting for them. He looks at Tim and Lee with pure disgust, then reminds them that they have turned against their own white community. In his eyes, they are traitors. He tells them that for the next 12 years, they will rot inside these walls. After the warning, they are searched from head to toe. The guards check them carefully, making sure they have nothing hidden, nothing sharp, and nothing that could help them survive beyond the rules of the prison. Once the search is complete, the guards begin walking them toward their cells. As soon as Tim steps inside the prison block, something changes in his eyes. He is not just walking, he is observing. While the guards think they are bringing him into a place with no way out, Tim is already building a map inside his mind. Then Tim is locked inside his cell. Lee is placed in the cell right next to him. Between them is only a wall, thick enough to separate their bodies, but not enough to separate their minds. Soon, both men begin tapping on the wall with their fingers, using the sound to communicate in secret. Night falls over the prison. Most prisoners try to sleep. Tim does not. He lies awake, staring into the darkness, thinking only about one thing: escape. The next morning, the prison bell rings loudly, waking every inmate inside the block. The prisoners step out of their cells and line up. After that, they are taken to breakfast. Tim picks up his food and looks around the dining hall for a place to sit. That is when he notices something strange. The prisoners are divided by uniform color. Some of them wear blue, others wear gray. At first, this seems like a simple prison rule, but Tim quickly understands that the colors mean something much deeper. Tim is still standing in the dining hall, unsure where he should sit. Just then, an old prisoner approaches him. The old man tells Tim to follow him. Tim listens, and the old prisoner leads him to a table. Once they sit down, the old man explains the meaning of the uniforms. The prisoners wearing blue are regular criminals. Some are murderers, some are thieves, and some have committed violent crimes. But the prisoners wearing gray are different. They are political prisoners. They are people like Tim and Lee, people who stood against the government. Then the old man explains the cruel irony of the prison. The blue uniform prisoners may have committed far worse crimes, but inside this prison, they are often treated better. The gray uniform prisoners, the protesters, are treated much worse because they opposed the government and spoke up for black South Africans. The old prisoner warns Tim to be careful. According to him, this prison is especially dangerous for people like them. At the same time, Lee is about to sit with the blue uniform prisoners by mistake. The gray uniform prisoners immediately start making noise to warn him. Lee realizes he is heading toward the wrong group, so he quickly changes direction and comes to sit beside Tim. Then, right in front of them, the prison shows how ugly it really is. A black cleaner accidentally drops some items. The sound catches the attention of a guard named Mark. Mark walks over to the cleaner, and instead of treating it like a small mistake, he begins beating him brutally. He does this for one reason: because the cleaner is black. The blue uniform prisoners watch the scene and seem pleased by it. But the gray uniform prisoners are furious. Their anger is visible, but they cannot do anything because the guards have all the power. Tim watches silently. In that moment, he understands that Pretoria is not just a prison. It is a place designed to humiliate, punish, and break political prisoners. Later, the prisoners go outside for exercise. During this time, the old prisoner speaks with Tim and Lee again. He tells them that he has been inside this prison for more than 20 years. In all those years, he has never seen a single prisoner successfully escape. Whenever someone tries, the guards catch him easily. The old man explains why. The security is extremely tight. Guards are watching the inmates all the time. The walls around the prison are 20 feet high. The prison is too large for anyone to simply dig their way out, and even worse, some prisoners secretly work with the guards. If they hear anyone planning an escape, they will immediately report it. The old prisoner tells Tim and Lee that every new inmate arrives with the same thought, that somehow he will be the one to get out. But according to him, that dream always dies. No one escapes Pretoria. He warns them that if they are thinking about running, they should remove that idea from their minds right now, because the prisoners who tried before them did not make it. While they are talking, Another inmate is watching them from a distance. As soon as the old prisoner leaves, this man comes closer. His name is Leonard. Leonard tells Tim and Lee not to take the old man too seriously. According to Leonard, that old prisoner scares every new arrival the same way. But Leonard also admits one thing. The prison is huge, and because of that, digging a tunnel is basically impossible. Still, he believes there could be another way. If Tim and Lee have a smart plan that does not involve digging, then maybe, just maybe, escape is possible. Before leaving, Leonard tells them that if they ever find a real way out, they should let him know. He wants to join them. Then Leonard walks away. From a distance, the warden is secretly watching them. He does not know exactly what is happening, but the look on his face suggests that he does not like it. 23 days pass. Tim continues living inside the prison, but he cannot stop thinking about escape. Tim begins searching for another weakness. Then one day, his eyes fall on the lock of his cell door. He walks closer and studies it carefully. At first, he sees no way to open it. He steps back and sits down, still thinking. But then he feels as if the lock itself is staring back at him, almost telling him that there is no other way out. And that is when the idea hits him. If the lock is the barrier, then the key is the solution. Tim realizes that if he can somehow make a fake key, he might be able to open the doors and escape. The moment the guard leaves the area, Tim quickly rolls a piece of paper and pushes it into the lock. He uses it to get a rough idea of the size and shape he will need for a key. The next day, Tim goes to Leonard with Lee and tells him that he has found a possible way out. Leonard asks how they plan to escape. Tim explains that if they can make wooden copies of the prison keys, they might be able to unlock the doors and walk out. Leonard smiles, but not because he believes the plan. He thinks the idea sounds too simple and too risky. He points out that the prison has many doors, and each door will need a key. To make so many keys, they will need a lot of wood, and they do not have any. Then Lee gives a practical suggestion. If they can somehow steal pieces of wood from the workshop, they might have enough material to begin making the keys. Now, Leonard starts to take the plan seriously. He likes the idea, and from that moment, he becomes part of their escape team. The planning begins. The first major problem is that they need exact key designs. The real keys are carried by Mark, the most cruel and ruthless guard in the prison. During a meal, Leonard deliberately drops his plate on the floor. The sound draws Mark toward their table. As Mark comes closer, Tim keeps his face calm and secretly focuses on the keys hanging from Mark's belt. He studies their shape, their length, and their teeth, trying to memorize as much as possible in a few seconds. When Leonard tries to pick up the plate, Mark stops him. Instead, Mark calls the black cleaner and orders him to clean the mess because, according to Mark, that is his job. The cleaner bends down and begins picking up the spilled food. The gray uniform prisoners hate what they are seeing. They are angry, but they stay silent because speaking up could get them punished. Tim also says nothing. His attention remains fixed on the keys. After memorizing as much as he can, Tim returns to his cell and begins drawing the key design with a pencil. This is not a one-day job. Over the next several days, Tim keeps watching the guard's keys whenever he gets the chance. Sometimes he studies them near the guard's office. Sometimes he observes them outside in the yard. Bit by bit, he improves the drawing. After many days of effort, Tim finally creates a key design that looks accurate. Then he discovers something important. The keys for the prisoner cells all appear to share the same basic design. That means if he can make one working key, it might open not only his own cell, but many other cells as well. By now, they have spent 74 days inside the prison. One day, while Tim is working in the workshop, he secretly hides small pieces of wood inside his water bottle. These wooden pieces will be used to make the fake keys. To stop them from making noise, Tim stuffs a cloth tightly into the bottle, trapping the wood pieces so they do not rattle if the bottle is shaken. When the prisoners leave the workshop, a guard suddenly comes toward them. Tim becomes nervous. The guard looks at him suspiciously, and Tim starts wondering if he has been seen stealing the wood. Then the guard lines up the prisoners and begins checking them one by one. He empties their water bottles and shakes them to make sure nothing is hidden inside. One prisoner after another is checked. Then Tim's turn comes. The guard empties Tim's bottle and begins shaking it. For a few terrifying seconds, Tim waits. But there is no sound from inside the bottle because the cloth is holding the wood tightly in place. The guard finds nothing and allows Tim to leave. Tim returns to his cell with the stolen wood. Now the real work begins. Using the drawing he created, Tim starts carving a wooden key. It takes hours of careful effort. He has to shape it precisely, because even the smallest mistake could make the key useless. Finally, Tim finishes his first wooden key. Now he has to test it. He goes to the cell door, places the key inside the lock, and tries to turn it. It does not move. For a moment, Tim is crushed. It looks like all his effort may have been wasted. But Tim does not give up. He tries again. This time the lock turns. A look of relief spreads across his face. Tim has done the impossible. He has created a working wooden key. He opens his cell door, but his happiness does not last long, because right in front of him is another obstacle, a large steel gate. To get through that gate, he will need another key. But this gate has an even bigger problem. The lock is on the outside. The next day, Tim explains the problem to Lee and Leonard. He tells them that he successfully made a key for the cell door, but there is another steel gate ahead, and the lock is outside. His hand cannot reach it from inside, so they need a new kind of solution, a key that can open the gate from a distance. Tim then begins studying the steel gate key. Once again, he watches Mark's belt carefully whenever he gets the chance. He focuses on the specific key that belongs to the steel gate. This process takes many more days, but Tim keeps working until he finally manages to create a wooden version of that key too. Now it is time to test it. This time, Tim does not wait until night. He tries the key during the day, while Leonard stands watch from a corner. Leonard's job is simple. If a guard approaches, he must warn Tim immediately. Tim reaches the steel gate and carefully inserts the key into the lock. The key is tight. He pulls it out, uses a sharp tool to shave it down, then tries again. This time, the lock opens. But then a new disaster happens. The lock refuses to go back into place. Tim becomes extremely tense. He tries to fix it quickly, but while turning the key under pressure, the front part of the wooden key suddenly breaks off inside the lock. Tim panics. Leonard rushes over and tells him to hurry because a guard is coming. Now the pressure becomes even worse. Tim's hands start shaking. He tries to pull the broken piece out of the lock with his fingers, but it does not work. Then Lee quickly throws him a knife. Tim takes the knife, pushes it into the lock, and somehow manages to remove the broken piece of the key. There is no time to properly fix the door, so he leaves it as it is and rushes away before the guard arrives. Moments later, a heavy-set guard comes near the gate. For a terrifying second, it looks like everything is over. But the guard does not notice the problem with the door. He walks past without paying attention. After the guard leaves, Tim returns to the gate and tries again to push the lock back into place. But no matter what he does, it will not go back properly. In the end, he is forced to leave it and return to his cell. That evening, Mark comes to the area and notices that the cell gate is open. He stops and looks at it, clearly confused. Inside his cell, Tim cannot sleep. He is terrified that the open gate will expose everything. If Mark investigates properly, Tim and the others could be finished. But Mark does not think too deeply about it. He assumes that the heavy-set guard must have accidentally left it open, so he simply closes the door. When Tim hears the sound of the door shutting, he finally breathes in relief. The next morning, Leonard's son comes to visit him. Leonard is overjoyed to see his child. For a brief moment, the prison walls seem to disappear, and he is just a father sitting in front of his son. But then the boy begins speaking to Leonard in French. Mark hears this and becomes angry because speaking in French is against the prison rules. Even though each prisoner is supposed to get half an hour with family members, Mark ends Leonard's visit after only 5 minutes. Leonard begs him to allow more time, but Mark refuses. He takes Leonard's son away, clearly enjoying Leonard's helplessness. This moment breaks something inside Leonard. Mark's cruelty fills him with rage, and from that point on, Leonard becomes even more determined to escape. He no longer just wants freedom, he needs it. By now, the men have spent 142 days inside the prison. The three of them continue working on the problem of the steel gate. They know the key can open the lock, but the real issue is distance. From inside the cell, no one can reach the lock on the outside of the gate. While they are sitting together and discussing the plan, a guard suddenly approaches. Luckily, Leonard sees him in time. The moment the guard comes close, all three men pretend to be cleaning the cell. Mark stops at the door and asks what is going on. They calmly say that they are just cleaning. Mark looks around but does not see anything suspicious, so he leaves. As soon as he is gone, Lee notices the broomstick in Leonard's hand. That simple object gives him an idea. Lee says they might be able to use the broomstick to open the steel gate from inside the cell. If they attach the key to the stick, they can push the stick through the window bars and guide the key toward the outside lock. The idea sounds promising, but there is still a serious problem. Getting the key into the lock is only half the job. Once the key reaches the lock, they still need a way to turn it. The answer comes the next day in the workshop. Tim sees another prisoner operating a mechanical machine. Watching the movement of the machine gives him an idea. He takes a small piece of wood and makes 2 holes in it. Then he drills a hole into the broomstick and attaches the small wooden piece to it with a screw. Now Tim has created a special tool. With this tool, he should be able not only to hold the key, but also to turn it once it reaches the lock. Later, Tim tests the device. He pushes the broomstick through the cell window and tries to guide it toward the steel gate lock. But aiming from that distance is extremely difficult. So Tim attaches a small mirror to the stick. With the mirror, he can see whether the key is lined up properly with the lock. After several tense attempts, Tim finally manages to slide the key into the lock. He begins turning it. But suddenly, the key slips off the stick and falls to the ground. Tim freezes. If the guards find that key the next morning, his escape plan is over, and his life could be in danger. But Tim is not unprepared. He had already thought about something like this happening. He takes chewing gum from his mouth, sticks it to the end of the broomstick, and prepares to use it to retrieve the fallen key before anyone can discover it. Using the chewing gum stuck to the end of the broomstick, Tim carefully lowers the stick toward the fallen key. For a few seconds, everything depends on his hand staying steady. If the key stays on the floor until morning, the guards will find it, and their entire escape plan will be exposed. But Tim slowly presses the gum against the key, lifts it up, and manages to recover it. Now he tries again. The lock opens. Tim can barely hide his happiness. The next day, Tim tells Lee and Leonard the news. Both of them are thrilled. They pretend to do gardening, dig a small hole in the ground, and hide the keys inside it. But Mark is watching them. He walks straight toward Lee and checks his bag. Inside the bag, he only finds fertilizer for growing plants. Tim quietly brings a few more trusted prisoners into the plan. These prisoners do not join the final escape team directly, but they help by passing useful items to Tim and his group. Still, the most important thing, he needs a map of the prison. The next day, he secretly signals to the black cleaner and asks him to bring a newspaper from outside. The cleaner understands, but he wants something in return. He asks Tim for cigarettes and soap. Tim agrees. The next day, when the cleaner enters the prison, Tim silently asks him about the newspaper. The cleaner nods, and Tim understands that the item has been delivered and hidden. But neither of them notices that Mark is watching from a distance. Mark has seen them communicating through gestures. A little later, Tim goes outside under the excuse of throwing away trash. Then he retrieves the newspaper from the trash area. Inside that newspaper is the thing he desperately needs, the map of the prison. A few more days pass. One day, Tim is inside his cell when Mark arrives with a new pair of glasses for him. He tells Tim that the black cleaner has been executed because he had been smuggling items into the prison for inmates. Tim is devastated. He tries to control his emotions, but inside, his anger toward Mark becomes unbearable. But Tim also knows they are now extremely close to escaping. If he loses control and attacks Mark, everything will be ruined. So he swallows his anger and stays focused on the plan. Soon, Tim and Leonard begin another test. They get out of their cells and move carefully through the prison. Step by step, they come down the stairs and reach a grilled door. Tim tries to open it with one of the wooden keys. He is so nervous that sweat begins dripping from his face onto the floor. While they are working on the lock, they suddenly hear someone coming. Tim quickly pulls the key out of the door, and both men rush backward. They hide inside a nearby cupboard. The problem is that the cupboard door does not close properly on its own. Leonard has to hold a small screw with his fingers to keep the door shut. Moments later, the heavy-set guard arrives. He opens the grilled door and passes through. But while Leonard is holding the cupboard door closed, the screw suddenly slips from his fingers. For a terrifying moment, it seems like the cupboard door is going to swing open. Luckily, it only opens a little. Through the tiny gap, Tim and Leonard watch the guard pass directly in front of them. Tim places the wooden keys inside a mug, but he has no idea that this small decision could almost destroy everything. The next morning, the warden suddenly arrives for a surprise inspection of every cell. Because Tim has been working through the night, he is still asleep when morning comes. The warden wakes him and immediately becomes suspicious. He asks Tim why he is sleeping so late. If Tim was awake all night, then what was he doing? Tim says nothing. The warden becomes angry and orders him out of the cell. Outside, Tim sees that all the prisoners' cells are being searched. Then the warden calls Tim back into his own cell and begins throwing his belongings around. During the search, pieces of the wooden key fall out of the mug and land on the floor. Tim's heart nearly stops. The warden sees the wooden piece and picks it up. He asks Tim what it is. Luckily, it is not the full key. It is only the front section, so the warden does not recognize what he is holding. Tim stays calm and gives him an answer. He says it is a photo stand he made to hold a picture of his parents. Then, to make the lie believable, Tim places the piece near a photo frame and shows how it can support the picture. The warden's suspicion begins to fade. Then he notices the rope tied to the broomstick and asks about it. Tim quickly explains that he uses the rope to hang the broom on a nail in the wall. The warden calls him a fool, hands the broom back to him, and leaves the cell. As soon as the warden is gone, Tim almost breaks down. Fear takes over his body, and he begins to panic. He knows how close he came to being exposed. If the warden had realized the wooden pieces were keys, Tim would have been beaten, punished, or even killed. After that, Tim becomes much more careful. He starts hiding the wooden keys in different places instead of keeping them all together. Tim, Lee, and Leonard have spent 404 days inside the prison. At this point, they cannot wait any longer. They want out. But before the final escape, Tim needs to know exactly how many doors stand between them and freedom. To find out, he makes up an excuse. He tells the guard he has a toothache. Since the prison has no dentist, Mark has to escort Tim outside for treatment. As Mark leads him out, Tim quietly counts every door they pass. Then he notices something important. One of the doors is not opened by a key. It is an electric door, controlled by a button in the guard room. After his dental treatment at the hospital, Tim is brought back to prison. But when Tim explains the final plan, the other prisoners who had been helping them refuse to join. Only Lee and Leonard are willing to go. The others are too afraid. As evening approaches, Tim, Lee, and Leonard take off their prison clothes and change into normal civilian clothes. Meanwhile, Tim, Lee, and Leonard begin their final escape. They move forward, reach the grilled door, unlock it, and go down the stairs. But now the path is clear, because the heavy-set guard has left his post and gone to the upper floor. The three men unlock several doors one by one. Then they reach a door they cannot touch. It is the electric door Tim noticed earlier. This door has no normal lock. It cannot be opened with a key. If they try to force it, the alarm will ring throughout the entire prison. The moment he presses it, the electric door opens. Tim, Lee, and Leonard move through, filled with excitement and fear at the same time. Now only one final door stands between them and freedom. Tim looks through a small opening and sees the prison's main gate. Beyond it, he can see the road outside. Freedom is just a few steps away. The three men are overwhelmed. They hug each other, barely able to believe they have made it this far. Then Tim tries the key on the final door. It does not open. He tries another key. That one does not fit either. One by one, Tim tries every key he has made. But none of them work. The final door refuses to open. The three men are crushed. For the first time, Tim feels defeated. He says they have to go back. They will return to the cells, study this door, and make another key for it. But Leonard cannot accept that. After coming this close to freedom, he refuses to return to the prison block. Then Leonard notices something. The lock is set inside a wooden frame. Without waiting, he grabs a chisel and starts striking the wooden frame around the lock. Tim panics. He tries to stop Leonard because the noise could bring the guards at any second. But Leonard does not stop. He keeps hitting the frame again and again. He sees that Leonard has already broken a large part of the wooden frame. The lock is now exposed. Instead of stopping him, he tells Leonard to keep going. With a few more powerful strikes, Leonard breaks the lock free. The door finally opens. The three men quickly adjust their normal clothes. Tim takes the lead and slowly opens the next door. They move forward carefully, but just as they get close to the exit, Tim sees a sniper above them. The three men immediately hide behind a wall. The moment the path is clear, Tim, Lee, and Leonard move again. They pass through the main prison gate. They are outside. As they walk along the road outside the prison, Tim notices Mark nearby, talking to someone. The three men lower their heads and keep walking, trying not to draw attention. Then two more guards appear in front of them. But because they are wearing normal clothes, the guards do not realize they are escaped prisoners. A little later, they reach a taxi station. Tim approaches a black taxi driver, shows him some money, and asks him to take them to their destination. The driver refuses at first. He tells them they are white, so they should take the taxi meant for white passengers. But Tim insists. He says they want to go with him. The driver is surprised. For perhaps the first time, he sees white men treating him with respect instead of superiority. So he agrees and drives them away. The three men are now free from the nightmare they were forced to live inside.